Good evening, how are you? This is John Flannery, and I'm on a ship headed south toward home and Virginia. We're leaving the area in Canada, and we're making our way back. The subject of the hour is how the government has managed to create time after time so many errors. But the one I'm focusing on today is the indictment in 2 counts of James Comey, the former FBI director, in truth, for the fact that he did his job. I'll explain that in a moment. The person who has been driving it has been Trump, because Trump was on the other side of an investigation in 2016 and after, involving his connections with the Russians and their involvement in our election, and particularly what they did to help Trump get elected. In other words, corruption. And if there's any adjective that best describes Trump, it is usually corruption. Here we have a situation in which the former director of the FBI is being indicted on 2 charges. One is false statements. The other is obstruction of justice. Now let me run this back. In D.C. in recent days, because of the frivolous nature and factually and legally unsupported acts of the occupation of D.C. by troops called there by Trump, grand juries have refused to indict upon the recommendation of the prosecutor. This is very unusual. In fact, it's about as rare as you can imagine in the criminal justice system, because grand juries across the land basically operate, it's sad to say, as a rubber stamp for whatever the prosecutor recommends. So the prosecutor has a special responsibility to get it right. Now, when I was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, I was before the grand jury a fair amount, and they trusted my recommendations under law and the full presentation of the facts that related to a charge. That is the model that we followed in the Southern District. That is the model that all prosecutors should follow, state and federal. And that is, if there is an intervening body like a grand jury, you have to respect it, but you have to give it the opportunity to disagree. And there are so many cases that they usually do not. Thus the expression that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich if they were asked to do so. Now in this case, some of the DC effect seems to find fertile earth in this prosecution of Comey, because the grand jury was first asked to indict on 3 charges. I assume 2 of them were the ones I just mentioned, false statement and obstruction of justice. I don't know that, but I suspect that's the case. I do not know what the 3rd count is, but the grand jury refused to indict on the 3-count indictment that was presented to it. You and I do not know that dialogue. If I were the judge in the case, knowing that there were 2 indictments presented and they differed, I would be in camera, that is in secret, because as a grand jury and under Rule 6, what happens there is secure and private and confidential. Not that this administration gives a damn about those things. And the judge might inquire whether or not what went on in this case was righteous. Now, how could it be wrong? Well, let's start with, there's an overrunning premise here. One is that the prosecutor has to have the capacity, the professional ability, the knowledge, and so forth to go forward in a case like this. Trump has ousted the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, where the grand jury sat and where these charges have been returned. He resigned his office because he was asked by the Attorney General to bring cases that he said were not supported by law and fact. He was replaced by an attorney who has no experience as a prosecutor and who, in a matter of days, assumes to know enough about this case and whatever investigation went on before to indict Comey. How could that happen? Well, now let's roll it back again. Trump pretends he's allowed, and these are his quotes, to get involved in an indictment if he wants to. No, he's not. He's not permitted to get involved. He doesn't have ability to participate in a secret grand jury proceeding, notwithstanding the fact that he is the President of the United States. something we will cure someday, but presently he is the president, but he does not have the right to interfere in the grand jury itself. Now, could he look at evidence outside? It would be an act of misconduct, unethical, and perhaps even criminal if it was to shape a charge against an enemy of the White House. Also, there is a notion in criminal law called vindictive prosecution. If there was ever a case that fit that, this is it. Also, it's being brought now summarily without the full and considered inquiry of a good prosecutor, because they have waited almost 5 years to the day when Comey testified in Congress, and he testified from his home in Virginia. That's why the case is being brought in Virginia. And the statute of limitations provides that a case has to be brought, if there is one, within 5 years of the incident happening. Now, there is the grand jury rules that prohibit what Trump is doing. There are due process notions of selective prosecution. There is the question whether this indictment is entirely frivolous and only meant to harm, compromise, and hurt as a matter of retribution, which Trump repeatedly mentions, and if it could possibly be a real charge. It is hard to believe it's a real charge. Now, a comment by the president about a pending criminal case raises another question. Can I have a fair trial? And the answer, when a president comes out and says something about a pending case, he's spoiling the jury pool, the petit jury, as they call it, the grand jury, grand petit jury. So the difference between the two is one indicts and the other, the petit jury, a jury of peers, sits and decides whether or not the charges have merit on the instructions of the judge after hearing evidence. Now, keeping that in mind, Donald has specifically come out and said the following: Comey is a bad person. He is a sick person. I think he's a sick guy. He did terrible things at the FBI. And this is all about getting even for the Russian probe that appears valid in all respects. Nothing is wrong with it. Also, to run a grand jury investigation is not itself a crime. And it's ironic that he would implicitly be saying that whatever Comey did was false, when the charges in this indictment, when we get to see it, we'll find are false. And as I say this, I'm informed that Comey has issued a statement saying it's untrue what he's being charged about. So this is about getting even, which is not a permissible reason to indict anyone. You have to have a statute that corresponds to a crime, you have to have the evidence, and you have to have the inferential information that this is a legitimate claim. One grand jury said no. One prosecutor said no. One grand jury also said no to three counts over 2. And now we have a person who is not a prosecutor, doesn't know how to do it. You can hand her books and she could read them, I suppose, but she couldn't prosecute a case. This stuff is, well, number one, it's a complicated business, but another is the judgment that has to come with years of practice in doing this. So, Comey, I expect, will be making motions to dismiss this immediately. Perhaps ask the judge who presides over that grand jury to inquire into a transcript of what was presented to the grand jury and scrutinize whatever statements are made in it. That is it a speaking indictment in which they lay out all sorts of statements? And you can be sure every one of those statements is going to be taken to task, assuming the origins of this, which is Trump trying to get even with someone, which is unjustified, when in fact he did exactly what the investigation charged. Now, moving along with Trump, we have a situation in which Kimmel punches back on Trump. And the funny thing about that is it's about ratings. And Trump is criticizing Kimmel when he's getting perhaps the best ratings for a single show and onto his second show coming back when the matter has been settled with Disney. And he's getting better ratings, and he pointed it out, better ratings than Trump is getting. Now, there's more, because there's an embarrassment that shouldn't matter as much as it does, but it's clear by what happened to it that it matters a lot to Trump. And what does that matter? There's a statue in Washington, D.C., or there was, which had Trump holding hands with Epstein. And the National Park Service took it away and cut it up and got rid of it. Now, they had a permit for this statute, and that permit had not yet run out. And so this is the kind of example you'd expect from the brown shirts of Hitler, but we have Trump's new breed of cult, if you will. The cult of harm and danger and hate and discrimination, and the ends, that is winning, justifies the means, destroying things to censor the people from being sensitive to and understanding what's going on. Now, Trump is under crushing pressure, I think. And so that's one of the things that we see, okay? And Comey is the most recent expression of that. There's another thing, reading the tea leaves, that I can't tell you how dangerous or not it is. The Secretary of War, _war, once the Defense Department, Pete Hegseth, it's not Dreg, it's Hegseth, is convening a meeting of the military, generals, admirals, and staff, bringing them to Quantico, very unusual thing. And he's gathering his forces. The disloyal, I predict, will be fired. Is that too strong a statement? No, something is going on. You don't bring them here. Are we lining them up? Fair question. I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but are they lining them up to be loyal if he should declare martial law? It's entirely something he could do. He may be thinking, both Hegseth and Trump, that we need animals in service like the ones we have now, prosecuting what we believe without proof, based on profiling people who are Latin American or maybe Mexican or something, who may also be citizens and have legitimate rights to be here, but they don't do any inquiry into the facts, which may be similar to the Comey matter. So fools like these people who have no confirmation for their findings and who do things that are stranger than fiction are perhaps blowing up a problem for America by summoning these people. If you don't think the people around the world are going to look at this summons for all these military types, when we have Russian planes flying off Alaska, we have drones dropping in Europe, and we have Trump saber rattling without the ability to follow through, nor any design or plan to do so, at a time when he's sticking his finger in the eye of NATO. So that's one thing to keep track of. And in the amusing column, you may be interested to know that just like the movie, NASA and others are concerned about an asteroid which they say is zipping toward the moon. However, it's not expected to arrive before 2032, and they expect to find some way to deviate it or blow it up or something so it doesn't hit the moon. In the category of what do we do for the environment, it's interesting to notice how we're screwing up the market for electric cars. It is literally cheaper fuel to have an electric car, even a Tesla, rather than gas for a car. But hey, Trump doesn't care what it costs you because he's doing deals all the time. Is he doing this because he hates electric cars, because he's had a spat with his partner in crime, Elon Musk, or is it something else? Who knows? Is he seeking some advantage for certain companies? Is he seeking to hurt Tesla? Who knows? Now, in terms of other investigations that Trump is interested in, he wants to investigate Soros. If you're not familiar with the name, a very wealthy gentleman who has funded a lot of Dems and has opposed Trump vehemently. There it is, another member of the enemies list, and we're going to investigate him, and we're going to find something, and you won't know if it's true or not until we get to trial, or it's dismissed, or we're thrown out of office, any of those things. By the way, we have a situation in which the government could shut down if there is an agreement between those thunderheads on the Hill about whether or not we can have an ongoing government. And if we don't, Trump has said he wants to close down the government. So if they close down the government, he figures he can fire government workers willy-pilly in every direction. Another interesting story I got an interest in was, will Combs get his charges dismissed? Now, if you remember, he was charged with prostitution. The legal argument that his lawyers are making, I don't know if they made it before or not, it was that he was a user, not a pimp. And if he's not a pimp, then the statute doesn't apply. Not an easy issue. And if you follow the Luigi case at all, he's the fella that had quite a following because he shot an executive in a major insurance company. And the government has been talking publicly about the case all the time, just like in the Comey case or anything else. And the government has been warned by the judge not to keep this up, because if they do, they may find the case go out the door. And then I did see something that's kind of interesting. Among the knickknacks and T-shirts you can get, there's one welcoming refugees from America to Canada if they feel that they can't any longer put up with Trump. And that's pretty funny. Although Holly and I were together when some woman pointed out, when she had this T-shirt on, and I thought it meant what I'm suggesting to you, it seems to mean. She was saying, well, that's good that these people are leaving. A guy, good riddance to them, you know. So things are not always as they appear. And that warm feeling of getting along and so forth is just a fiction. We have to fight this to the end like it's a war, and it is. It's a war of words. It's a war of ideas. It's a war of government. It's a war of peace over war, of equal justice for all, returning to a republic and ending this incompetent, eager, captivating tyrant who hurts in every direction he turns. So that's what I got. Talk to you tomorrow if I can get to a camera. Bye-bye.